Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you can hear me. I've got it nice and close to me this time. My name's Carol Jewell. I'm the chairman of the Planning Committee. We have 9 elected borough councillors. As you can see, not everybody's here tonight for whatever reason, and our professional officers. There's a formal set of procedures which must be adhered to. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application, and then only those speakers who are registered to speak will be invited to address the committee. There is a strict time limit of 3 minutes per category of speaker, those being town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and those borough councillors affected by the application, after which the committee will discuss and debate an application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to reach a decision. It is important to stress you are here to observe, but not to participate. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with that recommended by the presenting case officer. It's important to understand that the committee can only determine the actual planning application presented before it, using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the Planning Inspectorate. Finally, this is a hybrid meeting with committee members present in the room, while some officers are attending the meeting in person and some connected via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. Right, the first item on the agenda is apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Akhtar and Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much. And then second item is minutes of the previous meeting. Committee members, I presume you've had a look at these. We need to approve them. All those in favour of the minutes, please. Anybody against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. I'm not aware of any applications to be deferred or withdrawn. Oh, this declaration of interest. So keen to move on. Are there any declarations of interest from members? No. Okay.
I have one.
Oh, sorry.
Even though I'm not a member of the Ruscombe Parish Council, I do sometimes attend those meetings, and when they discuss the application on new roads, I left the room and I was not present during those discussions. So I'm still, I just want to stress that I remain entirely open-minded on the decision tonight.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, then the application to be deferred withdrawn. There's none of those. So the first item is application 240803 Hillside, Low Woking Road, Crowthorne. And we have Helen is the officer that will be presenting this.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application at Hillside, Lower Wokingham Road is an outline application with all matters reserved for the proposed erection of 18 dwellings following the demolition of the existing dwelling and outbuilding. The proposal includes 40% affordable housing, which is equivalent to 7 dwellings of the 18. The site's located within the countryside and doesn't comply with the exceptions in policy CP11. However, the purpose of CP11 is to retain the separate identities of settlements and maintain the quality of the rural environment. And the development doesn't stand contrary to this overarching aim, despite it not meeting the exact criteria within the policy. Sorry. Here we go. So this is the site. There is an existing dwelling at the front of the site, and to the south of it is an existing garage building. This site has 3 accesses onto Lower Wokingham Road at present, one in the centre and a northern and southern access. And the proposed development retains only 2 accesses. So this is the site in aerial form. You can see the dwelling here and the outbuilding here. The residential part of the site follows this line and across here, that's a line of a fence. And then there is some land associated with, well, it's not residential, but there's land associated with the site behind, which has got hard standing along one side and grass at the rear. So this site was allocated in the ELAR. Originally, it followed the line along here. If it squares off along this fence, this larger portion of the site was allocated for 15 dwellings, which was brought forward into the local plan update to include the entire site. And the local plan update provides an indicative capacity of the site for 15 dwellings as a minimum. The application before the committee is for up to 18 dwellings. And if members consider a greater number than the 15 can be acceptably accommodated on the site without material harm, this would be consistent with the emerging policy position. Whoops, pardon. The indicative site plan, which we'll view in a minute, indicates that the 18 dwellings and all the associated infrastructure, garden, open space and drainage can adequately be accommodated on the site. So these are the site photographs. This is the central access of the site where the car is. This black gate here is the northernmost access, and the southernmost access is just off the end of the picture. And again, this is the central access to the site here. This top left is the rear garden of the property, which is just a grassed area. And then the other three photographs are the area outside of the residential garden. This shows the rear boundary of the site, and there is a steep slope between this rear boundary and the fence line, which abuts the properties on Little Frith. The difference in levels has been raised as an issue by neighbours, and one of the main concerns being drainage matters, particularly due to these differing levels. The submitted flood risk assessment has catered for this difference in levels, and there is no objection from the drainage officer on that basis. The site's entirely in flood zone 1, and the proposal is a relatively low density scheme. The indicative plan shows that the site's capable of accommodating a swale and other sustainable drainage systems, as well as open space. So there's space on the site to mitigate against any drainage or surface water runoff created by the development. A full updated drainage assessment, which takes into account any earthworks that may occur, is secured by condition and will be once the detailed design and layout is known. So this is the indicative layout. The application is in outline, but the purpose of the indicative layout is to provide comfort that the dwellings, gardens, open spaces, roads, parking, and everything else associated with the development can adequately fit on the site. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and a legal agreement, or to reviews if the legal agreement is not completed within 6 months of the resolution. The only other point I forgot to make at the very beginning is there's 2 corrections to the officer's report. One is in the recommendation in point II. Point II refers to a full planning permission, and it
Could you give us the page number, please? Sorry.
Page 14.
Page 14. So point II on page 14, it's at the very top. It refers to a full planning permission, but it's an outline planning permission. And the second point, again, I don't have a page number, but it is paragraph 203. Paragraph 203.
Page 52.
The sill figure is incorrect. It is 365 per square metre. not 536. Three, 6, 5. Apologies for not mentioning those at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Helen. Right, next I'm going to call on the people that are registered to speak. And the first one is Amari Queen, who is a resident. If you'd like to come forward, just to remind you that you have 3 minutes. We have a timer, and you may want to adjust the microphone so that it's closer to you. Yeah.
Okay. All protocols observed, but I only have 3 minutes, so please read as I talk. Okay. I own the highlighted property adjacent to Hillside, showed on the slide. The neighbours I have spoken to are not against development. We are objecting against the current proposal, as it is harmful and doesn't consider the community around it. Without taking away from the objections already lodged, I'm going to focus on the 3 main issues from my side, which are very intertwined. It's overdevelopment, privacy and sunlight, flooding and drainage issues. The number of 15 are being shown, and yet many of us believe that 10 is a more appropriate number. 18 is just too many and is considered an overdevelopment due to the harmful impact. Hillside appears to be unnaturally leveled compared to the environment around it and is significantly higher than that of its immediate neighbours. The development being considered here severely affects the right to privacy of neighbours. Our property ground level is well below that of Hillside. Indeed, the Hillside property ground level is in line with the windowsills of my 3 small children's bedrooms. If you look at satellite photos, it shows screening provided through trees on the boundary. These are 99% deciduous, and thus there is no screening during autumn and winter. The sharp fall from Hillside and then the hardening of ground will mean that water needs to go somewhere, and it will flow to its lowest point, our gardens. The high-rise buildings will tower over us, taking away our privacy and limiting our sunlight. Frustratingly, there's nothing I can do to protect my small children's privacy, as the trees are governed by TPOs, the soil is waterlogged, so no new plants can grow, and I can't raise the boundary wall, as planning permission is required. And let's be real, who's going to approve a boundary wall of 6 meters high, never mind being able to afford it? The first 2 photos, thank you. The first 2 photos show the view from sitting on my small daughter's bed and a man on the Hillside site being able to look straight into her windows. The third, showing the trees in winter, providing no screening. Next. These photos show the current drainage issues. Ashdale Park is very much in the same, and evidence has been provided in the objections.
Wrap up, please. That's the end of 3 minutes.
Oh gosh, okay, conclusion. Sorry. Okay, and please consider all the objections together with this presentation. If the committee members still deem it necessary to approve this application, please consider stipulating conditions covering overdevelopment, layout and boundary restrictions protecting our rights.
Thank you, Amari. We've had, I think that's now repeating what you've said, but thank you. You did
Thank
well.
you. Can you just go to the next slide? Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It sounds a long time, but once you start going into it, it is tricky. Right, the next person I've got is Charles, who's the ward member.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, can I just ask if Liam could put the first slide up for me? Thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to ask the committee to reject this application. Myself and fellow residents nearby can support development of the site, but simply believe the scheme presented is too large, a particular number of houses, and will do real harm to the area. Lower Wokingham Road on the front follows the pattern of other rides in the area. At no point on this road or in the area is there a semi-urban estate with a density of housing significantly higher than its neighbours. Planning is meant to resolve around the idea of placemaking. This development, as you can see, has no sense of place. The developer has simply tried to cram in as many houses as possible. The WBC Trees and Landscape officers also commented that this development does not have a sense of place. My view is not alone. The main reasons you should reject this application are down to the level of overdevelopment, the consequent harm it will do to neighbours. You've heard from a resident about the impact of properties to the rear. The ground level of this site is 3 to 4 metres higher than Little Frith. Design Proposal 2, the one on the right there, which is the current one, has houses located within 24 metres of this boundary. Residents of Little Frith will now see a 2-metre fence 3 to 4 metres behind their properties with a 2-storey house just behind it. As the officer commented, to the rear of Jovike there's a steep slope where the ground descends sharply. A garden depth of 24 metres is in the planning document, which complies with the design guide. However, the 24-metre rear garden seems to have forgotten the 3 to 4 metre drop at the end of it. The only way to get round this is to move the houses forwards. However, you can't do this because the site's already too constrained. The intended layout also shows a pond to the bottom right-hand side of the layout. The reality of this, as you've already seen from the photos, is this would simply be floating in midair. You've heard from residents Little Frith talk about drainage concerns from the land at Jovike. There's a stream behind this part of the land already to deal with this water. This runs into an area of open woodland next to Ashdale Park. Next slide, please, Liam. Residents have advised me that after heavy rain, water flows from the stream into that yellow area there, and the red area there is where it's flooded the nearby road. Adding more concrete to this site is going to increase the runoff to this area. I can support development of this site, and I think many residents would actually welcome it, but you can see from these design proposals it impose significant harms on their neighbours. I would ask that you reject this application, but if you are inclined to agree to it, I would ask you consider conditions to push development away from the Little Frith and Ashdale Park borders and improve the drainage flow into that area there to stop flooding being a problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Charles. Did you take a breath? That's very impressive. Thank you. Okay, that's all of the representations from the speakers. I'd like to now go back into the committee and yes. It's Helen that's putting them up. Oh, okay. Right, thank you. Right, committee members, does anybody want to start the ball rolling, please? Yes, Rochelle.
Won't the swales or suds actually prevent most of the flooding?
I ask Helen on that one.
Yes, so the sustainable urban drainage and the swale are part of the drainage. It's not a pond. It is empty, and if there's flooding, it will fill up, and it's not just a sort of nature pond or anything like that. It is part of the drainage system.
Yes, I've seen the suds work very well in a couple of places in Winnish. So yes, they do prevent flooding.
Anybody else want to make a point? Yes, Moses.
Oops. Okay. The residents have raised concern about the differential in height. How do you propose to address that differential so that the flooding is not exacerbated?
So there's a condition which is, bear with me, I'm not sure which number condition it is. However, there is a flood risk condition that requires a full updated drainage assessment. And if the developer decides that any earthworks are required to change any of the levels, that flood risk assessment will have to take into account any changes that they make to the levels of the land.
So this site has history of previous refusal. What has changed fundamentally now that we should approve this application?
There was an application refused in 2015, I think, was the most recent one, and that was prior to the site's allocation, and it was also prior to the council being unable to demonstrate their 5-year housing land supply. The other refusal in 2006 predates our current development plan and the MPPF.
Did you have another question, Moses, or is that answered?
I'll come back if I have questions.
No problem. Do any of the other committee members want to make a comment? Rochelle?
Could you please explain what will happen if we don't have a 5-year land supply, and what would happen to the rest of the area? How many more houses we'd have to build, things like this, and what it could affect people? And how well do you think that all of the drainage works will prevent the flooding?
So, thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, the council does not currently have a 5-year housing land supply or a 4-year housing land supply under the updated MPPF. So we are currently in that scenario now. So I'm not sure there's an answer to the first part of that question.
Will this help the 5-year land supply, at least increase it a little bit, closer to the number we need?
All development for residential will contribute to the council's identified housing needs, whether that be affordable housing, care homes, market residential, whatever mix, it all contributes to the identified needs of the council. Larger sites will contribute more, smaller sites will contribute less. Planned sites are planned, windfall sites are not within our calculations necessarily. And the delivery trajectory of each site will also contribute. So again, outline permissions are purely outline, and there will be detailed reserve matters stages later on. Full applications have all detailed on the table for you to consider, and therefore they have different timescales in which they could be implemented and delivered.
Thank you very much, Brian. Yes, Wayne.
Well, I come to my main question. I can't find it, Helen. What would be the status in conjunction with the Finchampstead neighbourhood plan? Was this site in their plan?
So in terms of the Finchampstead neighbourhood plan, the site isn't allocated per se because but it is endorsed. So it's I don't have page numbers, I'm afraid, but it's paragraph 15 is onwards. But yes, that supports the proposed allocation for the 15 dwellings.
So it supports and it refers to 15 dwellings, does it?
It supports the allocation, and the allocation is for 15, yes.
So from what I'm hearing, the principle of development here is not the argument. Although that conflicts with CP11.
It does conflict with CP11. However, that is effectively correct because the site has been allocated. That principle has effectively been sort of accepted.
Do you know the estate to the, well, I'm looking at it to the left, what the density is for the, what is that estate called? Little.
Bear with me. Sorry.
Do you know what the actual density is for that?
In the report. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I do have it in here. It is paragraph 86 and 85. So we've got the Ashdale Park development, which was 11 dwellings per hectare. Little Frith, 11 dwellings per hectare. The east dwellings along Lower Wokingham Road, 12 dwellings per hectare. and the Brambles 25 dwellings per hectare, and Bramble Grove 14.6 dwellings per hectare, and the proposed scheme at 18 dwellings per hectare.
Right, so it's a mix.
Yeah, so
And-
there's a mix, but it's it's 18 for this site.
So if we then can come back to levels, that is something that is not up for grabs this evening, because it's if all matters are reserved.
That's correct. All matters are reserved. So it's about the principle of whether the dwellings could fit on this site and how they could fit with all the infrastructure and everything there. I mean, we acknowledge that there is a drop at the back of the site, which on the indicative plans, it shows that it would be at the bottom of back gardens, but it might be dealt with in another way if the layout changed.
So if the committee were minded to approve this outline, what conditions, because if you look at that previous drawing where the land slopes down 3 or 4 meters, and that's where you have in this indicative diagram, that's where you have your swell. And obviously you would have a grid system here where the water would flow to somewhere. And as you said, Helen, quite right, that swell could be elsewhere in the development. Could we have a condition that corrects this problem that we seem to have at the back of the site? Because in theory, one could move from front to back and just scrape the top of that surface. I'm not developing the scheme, and I know it's only indicative, but one could quite easily do that. And the edging treatments, I'm just wondering, I'm asking for direction here. How could we correct this differential in land? You know, because it's when you look at the pictures from the resident, that is quite telling, isn't it? If you're looking out of someone's bedroom and you're looking into the new development at the same level from the first floor into the ground floor, could we have a condition on land levels?
We could request a levels survey, but that wouldn't guarantee that. Well, they might not want to change. They might not be changing the levels. They might. Their intention might be building on the current levels. Requesting a ground survey wouldn't make them change, but it would give us an idea of what the levels would be like and how that would relate to the neighbours. But it doesn't guarantee that the levels might change or be changed.
Just jump in. Yeah, just to jump in, Wayne, and thank you, Helen. There's 3 separate aspects of design here being discussed, and they all need to work together. And if, as a committee, we look at, for example, one aspect, what are the levels? Are the levels too high? Are they too low? We would need to be aware that drainage works and is very inherently reliant upon existing levels. The development itself, level access to properties and sharp drops, or the engineering operation that would be required, for example, to landform, in many cases will affect viability of a scheme. And the fact that the proposal as it is presented to you indicatively is just one option. And ultimately, when a development is submitted for reserve matters, many aspects could change. The types of dwellings, the size of dwellings, the amount of parking, the location of the swale, the type of drainage. Further surveys could be done between the grant of outline and a reserve matters, which assesses soil types in more detail and determines that certain parts of the site are more appropriate or less appropriate for certain things that you see on that indicative plan. So we as a committee would be unwise and probably unjustified in requiring levels to be altered. which is why local authorities tend to put on finished floor level and propose an existing ground level conditions. So at a reserve matters stage, planning officers and environmental health, contaminated land officers, highway officers can look at, and flood and drainage officers can look at the proposed levels with the development on it and how it works, and whether all the nuts and bolts, the pipes, the swales, the attenuation works together. The same with a car driving on there being able to park rather than on a 45-degree angle. So there's a number of factors there, which again, looking at just levels or just privacy or just drainage or just design probably it needs to be kind of thought in tandem.
Thank you, Ryan. Did you want to come back on anything on that, Wayne? Or you've...
Just, I obviously understand what you're saying, Brian, but when somebody does an indicative drawing and they put the pond in one place, the chances of them moving that to the other end of the site, because I just think they would want to do that. They would want to keep that because they're not. Well, I know they work in places, but sometimes in the summer they dry up and we have problems with them and the odour, etc. And we have that in places. So I would imagine the best place for it is down in that corner with a certain amount of ways of keeping it a certain level of water in there to remove the odour. My fear is if you just think of it in the cold light of day, that pond is 3 meters lower than the surface area in theory. So all that water will be going into the neighbouring properties. That's why I'm saying if we could put a condition in there that looks to whoever, because it's not, we can build all sorts of things these days because the expertise is out there to sort that problem out and get that level right. For me, it isn't a simple job. It's all land levelling.
Sorry, thank you, Wayne. Yeah, I think the points you're making are completely relevant and they almost feed in word for word with the drainage condition that's proposed, condition number 33. And it's quite a long, apologies, it's quite a long worded condition, but the tests of infiltration, the tests of calculations of the amount of runoff that the site currently generates as a green field with nothing on it, and how much it would generate in terms of flow rate when it's got built form on it, roofs, gutters, gardens, soft landscaping, etc. And there's a number of assurances in there, which unfortunately I'm not qualified to confirm to you now, and we don't have the detailed proposals. Thus, condition number 33 is an integral part, as it is with most developments, in ensuring that the local authority is satisfied and the drainage officer is satisfied that not only does the attenuation and the drainage features perform as they are meant to perform, but they do not cause problems elsewhere. The same with roads, transport, all other matters. We don't have the technical detail of a road construction or the drainage at this stage. That's why there are a number of quite detailed conditions on there. If it comes to a reserve matters stage and the calculations, the evidence doesn't stack up and the maths doesn't work in terms of attenuation, drainage, surface runoff, then that will become very evident. And it's not necessarily something we can doubt at this stage without the corresponding evidence to say that it will not work. And of the sort of 8 or 9 requirements of that condition, we do not have any information, anecdotally at least, in terms of what the site is like now without any drainage infrastructure on it, as to how this site will perform. Like many undeveloped sites, we don't know. That's why we insist upon quite detailed and heavyweight conditions.
Thank you. I think the point that you made, Wayne, to begin with, it is an outline application with reserved matters. So the figure that we've got here is indicative. And I think if the concern that was expressed certainly at the site visit was that houses down that bottom end would have an impact. But that they may not end up being there if the drainage and everything else can't be achieved on that site with that huge drop. Then that would change anyway once we get to the reserved matters. But did you want to come back?
When you said 33, Brian, that's not here. That's not. Well, page 66 just refers to.
Apologies, we do have a slight
Surface water drainage strategy.
Yeah, sorry, we have a page number issue at our end with our agenda. So we'll go with paragraphs if we can, and if not, conditions. Apologies.
Yeah, 66.
Page 66, condition 33.
So, Wayne, unless there was something more, do you want to come back later?
I would ask us to break protocol and bring this back under reserved matters to this committee.
By which you mean?
You get outline. And the reserved matters come back to this committee. That's breaking protocol. That's not the Constitution. But because we've got concerns, or if I'm the only one who's got concerns, sorry? Yeah, I've got concerns, yeah. We bring it back to this committee, which we used to do years ago.
That's absolutely fine, Wayne. I think the key thing to note is the committee can't change the Constitution here and now, but the ward member for the area is absolutely at liberty, as with all reserved matters, any applications, to request it's brought back, and that's not an issue, and we've brought back many reserved matters via that route. So I don't think there's a risk of it not coming back if approved.
Is there anybody else that wants to make a comment? Martin, did you want to?
I had a comment about the density. So, and I'll speak maybe this beforehand, but so in the plan, in the Finchhampton Naval Plan, we have about 15 dwellings. Now it's 18. But you mentioned that it is because we have an extra piece of land next to it. But that sounds a little bit weird because the owner has been living there for 8 years. So did we not know that piece of land before?
If you look at the supplementary agenda, it's got the two plans next to each other. The one that was the original plan is on the left without the strip of land. And the one on the right has the additional strip of land to the north included in it. This is what was put forward to the council by the landowner. It's not, the council didn't have any control over what they put forward. They first put forward without the strip, and then they put forward an additional bit. So we considered the additional bit as well. I don't know whether they acquired it, it was in a different ownership or otherwise, but they came back to us saying they had more to offer.
Did you want to come back on that, Martin?
Okay, that makes sense. So, okay, I see what you mean.
Moses, you had your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the issue of the privacy between Little Frit and this development. I know you can engineer things because I'm an engineer, but even if you level the current proposed site, you will still have that differential. So how does this development propose to address that differential so that the issue of privacy can be resolved?
Helen, do you want to answer that? I think it's probably, we need to wait until we've got the detailed plan to know what they'll do.
Again, it would be something to do with the detailed design, because we don't know the location, size, footprint of the properties yet. So we don't know how that they will interact with those properties on Little Frit.
But it's, let me clear. It's either you're going to level that site to make it even as the new development, or you're going to leave it as it is. You can work on the new site, but you can't do anything about the Little Frit because it's existing. So except you're going to bring down the properties, you're still going to have that differential.
I think if I can just say, it must be very confusing to the residents that are here to think, surely you've got to take that into account. But the planning system is such that we have an outline planning application here, which is just about the access, just about the principle of development. The detail we haven't got. We've got an indicative plan and we're basing a lot of comments on that, but that might change drastically. You never know by the time it comes to those detailed matters. So Moses, I understand your concern about those levels, and I think we all share those concerns, but they don't need to tell us what they're going to do about them at this stage, because it's an outline application and that will come under reserved matters. Unless
privacy has to do with the principle of development, though. Privacy has to do with the principle of development. It's not a matter of reserved matters. It's not what they can do. It's just the issue of, because like Colin said, we need to address the issue of privacy.
Privacy is really affected by how close everything is, and we don't know where it's all going to be yet. So that's the issue with that.
So if I just jump in here, in the neighbouring amenity site section, which I'm on paragraph 102, apologies for the page number, it states that the back-to-back distances between the plots and the dwellings are 24 to 38 metres, and the plots, so that's the gardens, 11 to 12 metres. And this complies with our minimum distances in the Borough Design Guide. So in terms of that, the indicative layout does indicate that there is sufficient distances for privacy.
Sorry, you are reading provisions that assume the terrain is level. Here, the terrain is not level.
So just to add a bit to that, Moses, there's two aspects here. There's obviously we have an indicative layout in front of us, and the purpose of that layout is to demonstrate to the local authority whether that quantum of development can work in some way. Can the site accommodate 18 units satisfactorily? Things are likely to change. Maybe not a lot in certain areas, maybe a lot in other areas. But ultimately, we've got a set of guidelines in our BDG about back-to-back distances. In certain relationships, in certain urban areas, the distances are much less than what we have here. In suburban, semi-rural areas, they're much greater. There's flexibility there. Also, in addition to that flexibility, is the site-specific circumstances. And there may be things like a change in levels, which means that a greater distance is required. But likewise, there may be aspects of natural screening, like mature landscaping, TPO woodland, as we have on this site, which, as members would have seen from the site visit, would emphasise the fact that it's not a flat, treeless, open site. The relationships of surrounding dwellings and the names of the roads escape me. It is Little Frith and Ashdale Park also have similar back-to-back distances and relationships without a change in levels of 22 metres, in some cases even less than that. But again, that's an established residential relationship of two separate housing developments. So ultimately, when we look at this site for 18 and we look at how it interacts with the other sites, members, the local authority need to come to a balanced judgment as to whether that is so out of keeping or so substandard in distances or so great a change in levels or such a lack of natural screening that those distances that we talked about in the BDG don't apply. Now, officers' conclusions that have been presented to you are that based on the level of screening, based on the character of the area, based on the fact that it's outline permission, means that that change in levels is not significant enough for us to be recommending refusal on that basis. Okay, so that's what's been presented, and obviously no decision is made, and that is up to members to come to the conclusions of the committee. Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any other members of the committee that want to ask questions or to comment? So we do need to move to some sort of decision here. I think we've heard everything. I need a proposal then from committee members as to where we go from here. At the moment, the officer recommendation is conditional approval. if we want to go any different from that, there has to be reasonable planning reasons why there's some concern. So does anybody want to make a proposal? And then I need to ask if there's a seconder. Okay, this is all very familiar. Joseph, you looked as if you were about to say something. No? Okay. Right. Okay, from the chair, then I'm going to make a proposal for conditional approval, and I would seek a seconder on that. I've got one, Rochelle. So if we can then go to a vote, see how that pans out, and then go from there. All those in favour of conditional approval, please show. Those against? And then any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, so that decision is approval, but I'd like to stress to those people here that that is just the outline. I think there'll be a very different discussion when we get to actual details, and hopefully we can address some of those issues that have been raised. Right, we go on to the next application then. Which is on page. I've got my usual post-its. Okay, I think we can continue then with the agenda. The next item is application 240990, which is land west of New Road, Ruscombe. I've got some people to speak here, but can I ask Ben to make the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is application 240990 to land west of New Road in Ruscombe. This is a full planning application for the proposed erection of a 2-story, 66-bedroom care facility for older people. This is a specialist facility in that respect, with associated parking, access, improved landscaping, associated groundworks, 4 ancillary outbuildings, following the demolition of the existing 12 buildings on site, which amass 2,813 square meters. The site itself is located fully and solely within the modest development location of Ruscombe, and therefore the principle of development in this location is absolutely acceptable. Moving to the site circumstances itself, it's quite a unique site, shall we say, in the fact that it is a predominantly residential vernacular surrounding. However, the form is not relatively fixed, given the surrounding developments such as the Ruscombe Business Park within a few hundred meters of the site, Loddon House itself, in which case the vernacular is not massively fixed. The site is very unique, given the fact it is a derelict nursery, and this within a residential area cannot be considered, in officers' view, to be a more compatible use to a use which is inherently residential by its nature. Existing views from New Road, as the images show, this is slightly a red herring, because under the lush, what appears to be lush undergrowth, is over 100 tons of rubbish. Now, unfortunately, fly tipping has occurred on the site since ceasing to be used for a commercial nursery, and this unfortunately leaves the site in the sorry state that it is today. So building on this point, as we can see, unfortunately, the site has been subject to significant antisocial behaviour, as evidenced quite nicely here with burned out cars, signs of vandalism, etc. And that's just really the start or the tip of the iceberg, shall we say. Accordingly, the development put forward proposes an opportunity now to make best use of a derelict site, which is a real rarity within the borough, and an opportunity to redevelop this accordingly. So as I've mentioned, the existing site amasses 2,813 square meters of built form. And again, this is quite deceiving from the street scene, given the fact that there is significant setback, which the proposal will follow. The proposal will reduce this overall by 1,000 square meters on site, and it will also centralize development as the proposed site plan shows. Now, it does not take a detective to realize that care homes themselves, they are larger than residential dwellings. However, the careful design of the proposal means that essentially the views you will be affording from New Road represent that an identical width and height to an average 6 run of terrace dwellings. Now, this has been measured using Ruscombe's own housing. So the appearance, whilst it is definitely a building of some size, given viability reasons, because it needs to be, this is not a residential dwelling, but the form, what will be appreciable to people integrating with the street scene, will be that which represents ultimately not something too far off residential form. 30 parking spaces are offered, which are 5 above the recommended. So the applicant, it did, of course, depart from our adopted standards. However, this has been very well justified that 25 is the optimal amount. However, due to discussion that the applicant has had with the parish and residents, this has been increased by 5 parking spaces. Therefore, there is an oversupply in this respect. To the west of your site, as you will see, is the biodiversity area. Now, this, again, is unfortunately very much populated with rubbish, and this is the RPA of what the Ruscombe Parish regards as a very important green infrastructure network. The site will clear this up whilst providing a notable biodiversity net gain on site. It's further of note, and this site is quite nice to show this, that this is a fully BDG compliant scheme. It complies with the Bar Design Guide in full. And in fact, if you measured this site using the Bar Design Guide standards for buildings above 2 stories, so that could be a 5-story building as far as planning is concerned, the proposal is entirely compliant and in excess of those requirements. In terms of the elevational form, as we can see, this is broken up quite nicely using a mixed material palette. The precise nature of these materials are to be secured by planning condition, which has been agreed by the applicant. And ultimately, what we're left with is a high quality care home in an area with demonstrable need. Some indicative visuals are shown here, which show, I'd say quite importantly, the fact that the roofscape is made up by photovoltaic panels. Now, the PV panels themselves, this development is very much self-serving in terms of energy, which is, for a building of this size, a somewhat rarity. And by doing this, the proposal will achieve BREEAM Excellent or Alternative, which has been agreed by the applicant to be secured by planning condition, and therefore the proposal in this respect is climate change resilient. Ultimately, Office's recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and informatives listed within Appendix 1 of the committee reports. The completion of an associated Section 106 legal agreement and the terms of this were listed within the recommendation of the committee reports. Finally, following the receipt of a Great Crested Newt district license granted by NatureSpace, alternatively, should, in the unlikely event the S106 is not signed within 6 months or within an extension agreed, members are requested to refuse the planning application as detailed in the committee report, or authorize refusal of permission in the event that a copy of the Great Crested Newt license provided by NatureSpace has not been submitted within 1 month resolution. And just to confirm, this is anticipated to be received early next week in line with advice received from NatureSpace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. So we go on to those people that have registered to speak. The first person is Corinne Weaver, who is a resident. Corinne, I know you know, but just to remind you, you have 3 minutes. We have a timer. If you want to adjust your microphone so that you let me know when you're ready to start and we'll press the time.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, I live at number 37 New Road. My boundary is 20 metres away from the boundary of this proposed development. I've shared a presentation. It'd be great if you could go to slide 2. Hope this isn't eating into my 3 minutes.
It won't do. Thank you.
If you go to the next slide. Yeah, so I'd just like to say I've moved in 6 months ago, so my reference to previous planning applications is not personal. Here I want to reference the precedent set 20 metres away from the proposed development. Here you will see a very small first-storey extension which was refused due to impact on character and street scene. However, what I find hard to understand and comprehend is how what is akin to an office block, in my opinion, you would find this on any business park, which also has a car park out front, has, in the officer's view, an acceptable impact on character and street scene. There is little consideration, in my view, of the topography. So you'll see all the properties that are on the southern flank are chalets or bungalows, and all those on the northern flank are 2-storey, but down the hill. Now, the planning officer has made reference to Loddon House. That was on the same topography as the 2-storey buildings surrounding it. So in my view, that is a very unfair comparison, and this is perhaps more appropriate. My other concerns relate to privacy. So the planning officer has outlined privacy concerns in quite detail in his report. He's obviously based it on guidelines and policies. However, what it fails to consider, in my opinion, is this building not only looks, if you could go to not only looks like an office block, but in my view, it acts like and behaves like an office block. This is a commercial business. There are 66 residents plus at least 20 staff in attendance at any one point. That means 66 residents. There are going to be any number of visitors, plus deliveries, plus service personnel. So in any one point, there are going to be 80 people in this building. Over a year, that could amount to hundreds. Over 10 years, that could amount to thousands. So in my view, on the plan, you can see that there are windows which will overlook into all the surrounding properties. They claim that these are not in habitable rooms, but I would argue they are worse, because you could have up to 80 or 100 people at any one point they want to come and looking out into people's properties. The applicant has accepted there is a privacy issue because they have relented to obscuring glazing on the northeastern flank. How it isn't across all of them, I don't know. My profession is in large-scale infrastructure development, huge multi-billion-pound projects. We pride ourselves in putting infrastructure in the right location. In my view, this is not the appropriate place to put this type of infrastructure.
Thank you. You did well on time.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and the next person I've got is Alistair Wood, the agent. I'm sure you know the score, Alistair. 3 minutes and counting. It's all right, we haven't started yet.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Alistair Wood. I'm the Planning and Development Manager for the applicants, L&T Care Developments, and thank you for this opportunity tonight to address you. L&T is a company that specialises in development and operation of care homes for older people and have successfully developed more than 100 such facilities across the country over the last decade. What we're proposing at New Road is very much a local community care facility intended for occupation by people in need of care already resident within the local community or that have a strong local connection. The care home is planned to provide both general purpose residential care and more specialist residential dementia care, and is designed to be flexible in its ability to adapt to acknowledge local need and demands. Our objective is to provide very much a home, a great place to live for those in need of care, and a great place to work for staff, almost all of which we are expecting to be appointed from within the local community. Since our original submission in April of this year, the proposed scheme has undergone a series of adaptations as we have listened to and positively responded to comments received from neighbouring and nearby residents. We've amended the scheme to include additional on-site parking to enable neighbours to feel more comfortable about the proposed development. We are confident that more than enough on-site parking is proposed to meet all of the day-to-day needs of the care home at all times. In addition, we have taken note of concerns raised and have adapted our originally proposed building form and design to accommodate hip tends to the roof, and in so doing significantly lessen any impact of the proposed built form. The following detailed evaluation from all neighbourly perspectives, we deem the proposed scheme acceptable relative to all WBC adopted spacing, privacy and amenity standards. We have provided a full suite of ecological reports, full landscaping scheme and drainage proposals involving 2 ponds that will serve not only drainage but also biodiversity and aesthetic purposes. The issue of the great crested newts has been mentioned, and we seek to address that by way of a district licence. Notably, our proposal is to deliver all of the home's energy requirements from discreetly accommodated on-site renewable sources in the form of ground source heating and cooling systems, and an array of roof-mounted solar panels. This application is not in any sense speculative. If planning permission is resolved to be granted, this care home is expected to be ready for occupation by no later than mid-2026. Summing up, our principal objective is to deliver the best and most attractive care home possible, and to provide a quality of facility that is very special and that older people from within the local community very much deserve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next person is Stephen Conway, who's the ward member. Have you sunk?
It's the levels, yes. I want to begin by thanking Ben for his report and for discussing the application with me. I'm acutely aware that he's the professional planner and I'm merely an amateur. Even so, it seems to me there are some legitimate concerns that the committee may wish to explore. The first relates to the relationship between the application and the Ruscombe Neighbourhood Plan. That plan was overwhelmingly approved in a parish referendum and has been assessed and then adopted by the Borough Council. It should therefore carry some weight in your consideration of the application. The neighbourhood plan identifies the site as suitable for housing. So too does the local plan recently approved by the Borough Council, which allocates the site for 20 new houses. I appreciate that the new local plan has not yet been tested and so carries limited weight. But I question whether the neighbourhood plan is in the same situation. It has been approved by the council after a public referendum and opportunities for disappointed parties to make representations. Ruscombe has a significant number of elderly residents, and the neighbourhood plan envisages the site as providing an opportunity for family dwellings to rebalance the parish's skewed age profile. The application, as you'll know, is for a 66-bed private care home for the elderly, which clearly goes against the intentions of the neighbourhood plan. There seems to me also a conflict with the Borough Council's aim to increase its own share of the care home market as a way of providing residents with a more affordable option and to save the council and the council taxpayer money on expensive placements in private accommodation. I realise, however, that you as a committee may not be able to do anything about this concern. But the committee might want to consider the relationship between the proposed care home and the existing neighbouring dwellings. While the distances comply with the council's standards, you might want to reflect on whether the bulk and massing of the flanks of the proposed care home make it unneighbourly. For the occupants of some of the adjacent dwellings, the new care home will certainly appear starkly dominant. The height, bulk and massing of the proposed building also are arguably out of keeping with the street scene of New Road and an edge of settlement site, such as this one. It is right on the edge of settlement opposite Greenbelt countryside. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, thank you. Over to the committee if anybody wants to make any comments. Have I missed something? Sorry, you're not on the list. Where are you from? Ruscombe Parish Council. Oh, can we let the gentleman speak? Or? Just checking whether I'm allowed to let you or not.
Sorry, may I ask, did you register to speak? You did. Oh, Cassidy. And was that to Democratic Services? And when was that, may I ask? Okay, and did you have any response saying you were on the list to speak tonight, or no? Okay, not officially. Okay, thank you.
Good. I've got something at my discretion. Lovely. It doesn't happen very often. I think the view of the parish council is really important, and there's obviously been a mix-up with your invite. So if you'd like to come forward, and you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't got a great deal to add, so I probably won't need the full 3 minutes. I must correct one of the photographs that was shown on the planning with the red car and that was supposed to be dumped. That was actually the owner's car of the site. So it's not a great deal of antisocial behaviour in Ruscombe. Ruscombe's got a population just over 1,000 people. The thought of an extra 60 over 65s moving into the area, into the care home, will, I think, have an adverse effect on our population profile. And I did have a quick look around to see what was the care homes. And within 4 miles of radius of Ruscombe, there's 19 care homes. Within 5 miles, there's 24 care homes. I think our 1,000 population, including myself, won't be requiring a home in there, and that's a huge one. And I also don't think that we'll be supplying any staff for that at £9 to £11 an hour. I can see the point of care homes going up because they make a great deal of money. A 66-bedroom place would create an income of £4.5 million a year. They only cost £8 million to build. That's why 100 built across the country, mainly financed by private equity, is a really good idea. I think we'd rather wait for accommodation, family accommodation, to be built that fits in with Ruscombe as a village. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So could somebody turn the mic off? Thank you. Okay. Right, back into committee then. Are any committee members want to make a comment? Yes, Wayne.
This is my favourite chestnut. Areas do neighbourhood plans, whether you like them or dislike them, for a reason. You go to a referendum, you spend 5 years producing it, and then your first hurdle, you get an application like this, which doesn't accord to the neighbourhood plan, and what happens? I agree entirely with Stephen. I know this area very well. It doesn't fit in with a street scene. Absolutely not. It completely at odds with the other houses in that area by bulk, scale and mass. It definitely needs something there, definitely, and that's why I think the neighbourhood plan sets out and the LPU set out housing. I think it desperately needs housing there. I don't think this building will be in keeping with that area and all the things I've mentioned.
Thank you, Wayne. Anybody else want to say anything? Rochelle.
I'm just curious, what's the need for new care homes in the area? And I would prefer to see them owned by the council to make sure the council could stay in business, among other things, and to keep the prices down for the residents as well. But what's the need for them?
Ben, could I ask you a question?
Thank you, Chair. So we recently published the LHNA. So our own figures, they split need into 2 different categories because there is no mandatory way to calculate need, which isn't very helpful from a planning officer's perspective. So the LHNA, which is the 2023 document submitted to support the LPU, outlines a need within the borough of 857 rented bed spaces at the top end and 447 up to 2040 at the bottom end. So the applicant has submitted their own needs assessment, which outlines that within a catchment of the site, 342 bed spaces are needed and that 489 are needed within the borough at this time right now. We've recently, unfortunately, lost an appeal just a couple of weeks ago based on a very similar consideration, which I hope we're all aware of at Oakdale. This was a committee overturn on bulk and mass, and it was allowed at appeal purely on the basis of need. Now, need is an argument which has been made by adult social care as we're meeting our needs, we want to be providing our own needs, which is something we can definitely try to do, and it's something we'd like to do as a council. I absolutely appreciate that. That unfortunately doesn't change our own data, which suggests there is a significant need for bed spaces for the elderly with such specialist accommodations as is proposed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Michelle, did you want to come back on that? No. Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment?
I want to echo a little bit what previous says. I mean, the neighborhood plan of the Ruscombe neighborhood plan sets out a vision of what they would like to do. Yeah, what they'd like the village to be in the future. And one of the things, the village needs and recognizes is affordable housing and allowing people who grow up in the village to be able to find accommodation in the village. And this is, we don't have much land in Ruscombe because we're next to the Greenbelt. So this is one of the very few places where we can actually build houses, affordable houses for the neighborhood, to help the village, grow. It's a small village. It doesn't have, we need to look for they have a bit of a vision what they want. And unfortunately, care home, I know they can build great ones. This is not really a good place to address that one. The site is probably suitable for up to 20 houses. I think we've seen in the emerging local plan and also in the neighborhood plan for Ruscombe. This 66 bedroom building equates to 36 residential units. Yeah, it introduces a whole different grain of development. It significantly increases the plot density compared to the single dwellings that characterizes the surrounding area. I recognize that the plots could accommodate such a large building, but the coverage of the site and also the density of the development, it appears to me at odds with the buildings around it and in the immediate surroundings. Also, the particular needs of the future occupants would likely alter the level of activities at the properties, with people coming in and coming out and staff and visitors. It will be a whole change of activity around a small village. That is not really what I would welcome.
Thank you, Martijn. Yes, Andy.
Yes, thank you. The new plan is so huge that compared to the buildings around the area, the residents simply don't expect these kind of things. And it will largely increase the population density, and it will increase the pressure to some aspect, for example, the traffic. And it's not only inside the site, it will also affect outside the site. And I know it is not in the plan to have this kind of facilities here. And I agree with many of our colleagues that said tonight, and we cannot approve this application, I think. And we should stick to our plan and provide good planning for the resident in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else want to make any comments? No. I'm getting the feeling that we don't like it around the table. Could I ask Brian possibly or Ben where we go from there if we can prove demonstrable harm, what the reasons for refusal would be, please?
Would it be all right if we just had a second to consider some of the points made? Because I'm not sure they're entirely correct.
Yes.
I think it's important we get the correct even playing fields before we make any informed decision. First of all, the Ruscombe neighbourhood plan does not formally allocate development. A vision for an area is one thing, and it's something that residents can appreciate, officers appreciate. It's a beautiful thing. But ultimately, we have a development plan compliant proposal in front of us here. Now, understand that a vision could be to build houses. I think Carol made it, the chair, apologies, I made it very clear at the start of this presentation that we're here to consider the application in front of us. We're not here to consider alternative uses on the site. I'm concerned that this is where discussion is heading. Now, given the limited weight, which Councillor Conway kindly acknowledged, and my committee report kindly acknowledged as well, the fact that we cannot apply more than limited weight to this. And I would be very careful with proceeding on the angle we are before we know the full facts of the weight the plan holds, the actual fact that the plan itself is complied with its location-specific policies, so it is within settlement limits. It does take the site's distinctive character into account. These are policies that are complied with, so they simply are. I mean, there is 2,800 square meters of built form on that site, and that cannot be taken lightly. So in terms of overall compliance with the NDP, the policies put forward to control development, in my view anyway, as was made very clear in the officer's report, it is compliant with the Ruscombe Neighbourhood Plan. Now, it doesn't echo the suggestions within the NDP, but paragraph 14 of the framework is very clear that neighbourhood plans can formally allocate development. They can submit local development orders. That hasn't happened in Ruscombe. So these points and suggestions, they're unfortunately considering alternative uses, which we don't have in front of us today, and the way applied to them needs to be treated with great caution, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Listening to what members have said, I've jotted down a few reasons, some of the concerns. I've just crossed one out because one was the neighbourhood plan. If the view is that that is a vision more than a plan with a capital P, then the concerns that the members have is the street scene and the adverse effect on neighbours because of the typical use of this, what's proposed here. Rather than 20 dwellings, which we know how many cars there'd be, this is going to be significantly more. Yeah.
So sorry, Chair. Just to clarify, using the borough's standard trip rates, which we must rely on, 20 residential dwellings would have a significant greater trip generation rate than this proposed care home with the statistics that have been presented to the highways officer, and there's no objections in this respect. If we're making a decision, I see where this is going. Please, can we have this as accurate, because we will need to defend in this appeal, and we would like a chance, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that was mentioned at the site visit. I'd completely forgotten about that. Given the advice or the comments that have just been made by the planning officer, does anybody want to come back and ask more clarification or to have a different view? Or let us move on. Ryan.
Yeah, can I just, you've highlighted two elements of concern raised by members. One was obviously street scene, and the other one was impact on neighbours, amenity. It would be good to understand, taking street scene first, what the perceived impact is, what the context is with surrounding developments, what a development of this scale would be expected, what sort of visual impact it would be expected to have for someone walking down the street in 15 years' time, similar to the care home opposite on the adjoining road. How, for example, similar developments fundamentally affect the character of the area. Does it fundamentally change? If you're a passerby and you're driving to see friends and you've never been to Ruscombe in your life, would you drive past this and would your head turn and would you go, oh my goodness, there's a care home? Possibly. These are questions that obviously in terms of context we need to understand, because if a refuser reason is arrived at on character of the area, as a council, we need to explain what is the character of this area, because an inspector will ask us that. Then they will ask us, how does this change that character? And if the character is mixed, if it's two-storey dwellings, bungalows, commercial, other residential care homes, then ultimately, are we introducing an alien feature here? Care homes themselves are not alien developments. They're not something we're not used to seeing. They proliferate most of the country. In certain parts of the country there's more of them than others, but that's dictated to by the market, demand and demographics. So ultimately character needs to be defined. If we are talking about a very strong identical character and we are changing that character, then that's an argument that officers could potentially explore and defend at appeal. In terms of amenity, the same needs to be considered. Side-to-side relationships tend to have principal elevations front and back. side elevations tend to be hallways, landings, bathrooms, pseudo glazing. Does this development pose anything unconventional in that regard? Are the distances sufficient? Does it meet our borough design guide? Does it meet adopted local policy? Does it meet national design guide? And ultimately, they're the questions an inspector will ask us, as with the Oakdale care home that Ben has referred to earlier and members are aware of because of supplementary. The appeal was allowed. It was refused on scale and bulk, impact, visual impact. Those arguments didn't hold up at appeal because ultimately the inspector sees we're not meeting our current housing needs. They see the identified need for the specific type of care home. The NPPF acknowledges specifically within the context of establishing need, the size, type and tenure of housing needs for different groups in the community should be assessed and reflected in planning policies. These groups should include, but are not limited to, big long list, older people in brackets, including those who require retirement housing, housing with care and care homes. The distinction in the neighbourhood plan of housing, national policy, local policy, doesn't necessarily break down different types, needs of occupants. It considers need as a whole, and within that there's lots of subsections: student accommodation, older people, affordable housing, market housing. So ultimately, any inconsistency with the intended purpose of the neighbourhood plan to deliver 20 units needs to be considered in the respect of the equivalent of 37 equivalent market dwellings in the form of a care home, which is also meeting its own specific needs. So a couple of points there that we need to frame the character of the area and privacy and any other concerns that members have against.
Thank you, Brian. I think what we're hearing is that we're between a rock and a hard place with the appeal that's at Oakdale, where it was refused by this committee, well, a previous committee, and it's been allowed on appeal, which takes away any sort of control over some of the aspects of any application. 2 points that Brian has made, that if we want to look at refusing this, or we've got a recommendation refusal, we need to identify the character of the area, why this is affecting that character, street scene character, whatever. That's one. And the other one is the amenity, is the effect on neighbours, the difference, the back-to-back, side-to-side dimensions, and whether or not they meet our design guide. Excuse me. So with that in mind, anybody got any comments to make?
I was just reading paragraph 23, page 98. I'll read it out. It is clear that proposed development would not directly reflect the site-specific principles set out in the Housing Design Code, Appendice A, of the Ruscombe Neighbourhood Plan. However, it must be concluded that the Ruscombe Neighbourhood Plan does not formally allocate sites for development, rather than echo the allocations proposed in the local plan. And I think this is, and I'm going to be in fairness to small parishes, if the local plan, and they are advised, parish councils are advised to work with the local authority hand in hand as you design your neighbourhood plans in conjunction with the local plans. So therefore, if the hierarchy of the local plan is allocating this site for housing, one must assume, rightly or wrongly, that the neighbourhood plan, made up of volunteers in a parish council, none of them planning experts, that's why they get planning advice, advice brought in to help them, they must assume that they are doing the right thing. So here, I would imagine if we stopped and spoke to everybody in Ruscombe, and he said, when you went to the referendum and you looked at all the policies in your neighbourhood plan, did you ever think that there might be a 9 metres care home put along that road? And I think the answer would be absolutely not. And the street scene along that road, and I understand, I don't exactly know what the property the resident was referring to, but the one that I think she's referring to, as you go along that road, right at the end, there's a mock Georgian type house which is quite high, but then the level goes down, so you're overlooking the fields. But the majority of properties along there were bungalows and chalet bungalows. So I don't see how this accords with the street scene. I'm sorry, I mean, again, I know this area very well. I still don't see that it fits in. And to answer your question, Brian, if I was driving along there in 2027 and I turn my head, I go, where did that come from? Because it wouldn't fit in. That's my view. Now, if we want to talk about the site up on the Lower Wokingham Road, Oakdale, I think it was called, Oakdale Lower Wokingham Road. Lower Wokingham Road is very, very different. They are substantial properties, as we've seen tonight on the previous application, which was not far from there. They are big dwellings. 9 meters wouldn't be unreasonable, but 9 meters high in this location, I think, would be unreasonable.
Martin.
I want to just follow up on Brian, but I mean, we have, this is a residential area where people live in normal houses. We also have the Ruscombe Business Centre, where we have larger parts. This, in a way, which I think for the residents of Ruscombe, they hadn't seen this one coming, is that suddenly you're going to have a piece of land where we want to build houses on. Suddenly that becomes a commercial business. It becomes like, as Corinne said, it will look like, a commercial business, a business center in the middle of the street, in the street. You see all houses, and suddenly it will look like a business area. And say like, oh, that's just not a business center. And then you go back into the normal housing street. So from a character point of view, I think it has a significant impact, both on the, the type of development, how this fits in with the character of the site. I mean, Ruscombe is indeed, as Paul said, a very small village. We have about 1,000 people. We do have a lot of care homes already in the area, and they have a business center that is sort of separate, has a separate part. And then you have, the village, the people live within the village, and this will be right bang, pretty much in the middle of that residential area. So from a character point of view, I can see this is not, connected.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make a comment about the character street scene? Andy?
I have a little bit to say, because when I see the plan and in the document, and I see there's actually the characters is quite not matched to the area, because this building, the design is quite high portfolio. It's try to use some geometry, I don't know, and it's going to make a high momentum, and is in symmetry in the layout. And this create my colleague is right. There's just like some commercial and building with is not quite suitable in this quiet residential area.
Thank you very much. Right, I'd like to move on if there's nobody else that wants to make a comment on those two issues. Has anybody got a proposal to put to the committee, please? Recommendation. I'm looking around.
Okay, maybe I'll need some help here a little bit. I think, there are some things that, that work in the favor, which is, but I'm looking at the balance. It's principle of development. We're not arguing about this site not being fair for housing. But if it comes to the layout and the character of the site, of the plan proposals, the proposal is there. It is out of character with the surrounding by the developments. It's not within in the grain, and maybe also I'm missing the affordable housing piece on this one. So those are my two suggestions too.
So, Martin, could I ask you to explain, you just brought in that affordable housing. Could you explain that a bit further?
Well, as I said, I think, you know, Ruscombe needs housing. It needs housing for the people. And at the moment, I know, and I think maybe it's a difficult one to carry forward because we don't have a plan to look at that one. So it will be mainly focused. I would reject it then on the, you know, the placemaking and the character of the site, and out of character with the.
Okay, could I ask you if there's a seconder for that proposal, please? Or do we need to clarify what we're proposing first of all?
I think we might need to check it.
So I've drafted something, I think, so the proposal by virtue of bulk, mass and height would significantly harm the residential character of the street scene, which is contrary to to Core Strategy Policy CP1 and CP3 and the Wokingham Bar Design Guide of 2012. Now, if we'd like to swap out street scene for area, we're happy to do that, but that's an okay reason.
Okay, that's my proposal. Thank you.
That was very quick. You didn't see your lips move there. Everybody, yes.
Sorry, that also includes section 106 and the reference to the licence, which was in the report.
Okay, did everybody understand what Ben came up with there? And if you did, I now need a seconder for the proposal that Martijn made. Right, Wayne. So, right, can we take a vote on? And as far as I understand it, it's a refusal in terms of. Ben, could you just repeat again what you said so we're very clear, please?
Yes, sorry, Carol. So it's the proposal by virtue of bulk, mass and height would significantly harm the residential character of the street scene, which is contrary to Core Strategy Policies CP1 and CP3 and the Wokingham Bar Design Guide 2012. So that's just the sole reason for refusal. But as Lindsay said, given we don't have a completed section 106, we need those different obligations as additional reasons for refusal. So those would be insufficient information reasons. It's just good housekeeping, really. And the Great Crested Newt license as well. So those need to be tacked onto the refusal. So I think that is 5 reasons for refusal in total.
Mustn't forget the newts. Okay, we've got a proposal, which has been repeated. We have a seconder. All those in favour of refusal on this application, please. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. So that concludes that agenda item. We've got a couple more things. So, yeah.
Just quickly in relation to the section 106 reasons, would you mind if you delegated wording for that to us to work out, just for the specific obligations, same with the GCN stuff? That'd be okay. Marvellous, thank you.
That's no problem. Just to confirm that we have refused that application. Yes, I've got that. Okay, there were just a couple of items that aren't on your front page. One was the appeal decisions that have appeared on the supplementary agenda. We just wanted members to be aware of that. And I think, Brian, I think you had something to just bring our attention
thank you.
to.
Sorry, Rochelle. Thank you, Chair. Just to bring members' attention, I think we've already discussed a number of these decisions tonight, but at the back of the supplementary is the quarterly non-householder appeals update, and members will obviously see the summaries prepared in there for each appeal, which doesn't relate to a householder application, but just to bring members' attention to the 2 items that were allowed that were committee overturns, committee decisions, whilst they were obviously previous makeup of the committee. We've obviously talked about Oakdale.
which obviously the inspector concluded the benefits outweigh the identified harm. The other one to bring members' attention to, which again is important given the nature and the contentious and sort of level of public interest for a lot of the residential schemes we're getting through at the moment, is the Trowse Lane, land west of Trowse Lane decision, which was for 81 dwellings. That was another obviously quite busy and long evening for that item, but obviously the summary is there, and the conclusions made by the inspector over things like landscape harm, the sustainability of the site, the accessibility of the site in the village, are very transferable kind of matters, which will and do and have come up repeatedly for the last few months with our items considered at our committee. Also, the fact that council can only demonstrate, or cannot demonstrate, a 4-year housing land supply is quite succinctly summarised, and how that is weighted by the planning inspector. I draw members' attention to this one because it is 81 dwellings outside a settlement on the edge of a village, and we, as you know, tonight we've considered 18 dwellings, and last month we've considered hundreds of dwellings. So there are lots of matters in there which, if members do get the opportunity, it is well worth reading those decisions, because again there are lots of transferable issues. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then finally, it was just a comment from me about site visits and how important they are. And we all know the dates of them. It's always the Friday before the planning meeting on the Wednesday, if there are any sites to be visited. If you can't attend, and I understand, pressure at work, etc., please would you give apologies, because we do hang around wondering, will somebody turn up or won't they? We have issues with people getting lost, me in particular. So I won't mention anything else, Greg. So it is useful to know who's going to come along, and then we know we wait for people who haven't turned up or whatever. So thank you very much. Close the meeting at, I think it's 8:37. Thank you very much.